Under a yellowish-brown sky on a ruined planet, the scars of war were evident everywhere. The echoes of distant explosions could still be heard, and the marks left by heavy weapon fire created deep fissures in the ground. This planet had been the site of one of the fiercest battles in the galactic war between humans and aliens. But now, the sounds of war had faded, leaving behind a deadly silence. Captain Thalric squinted through the sandstorm. Grains of sand struck his face as a bead of sweat trickled between his furrowed brows. His thick armor was designed to protect him from both the storm and enemy attacks, but beneath it, he was just a tired human. Beside him, his crew carried their heavy weapons, their eyes constantly scanning the horizon. Danger could arise at any moment. Tension gripped the group. The exhaustion of battle and the uncertainty of their situation had worn down their morale. One of Thalric's most experienced soldiers, Dorian, eyed the alien group walking with them with suspicion. The aliens, gray-skinned with slender, elongated limbs, had fought alongside the humans throughout the war. But Dorian didn't trust them. At one point, Dorian moved closer to Thalric, lowering his voice to a whisper. "Captain, these creatures are nothing but dead weight. We can make it out of here on our own. Why are we bothering with them?" Thalric looked around once more before responding to Dorian's words. Moving forward in the storm was difficult, but not impossible. Yes, humans could find a way off this planet on their own. But as Thalric glanced at Dorian, he took a deep breath and fixed him with a determined look. "We're human, Dorian," he said in a calm but firm tone. "We don't leave anyone behind." A moment of surprise flashed in Dorian's eyes, but he quickly lowered his head. His respect for Thalric ran deep, so he didn't argue further. This brief exchange echoed the moral struggle within the humans. Everyone wanted to escape this planet, but they had no idea how far they'd have to go to make that happen. Just then, one of the aliens, a woman named Seralith, approached Thalric. Seralith stood out with her tall, graceful figure. Her eyes, filled with the wisdom gained from the pain of war, radiated a calmness in the storm. Though her face was partially hidden beneath a hood, Thalric could feel her gaze. "Captain Thalric," Seralith said in a deep, soft voice. "I know this area. There's only one chance for us to escape, but we need to work together. The local predators are dangerous, especially those that attack from beneath the sand." Thalric locked eyes with Seralith, realizing she was no ordinary warrior. Her voice carried confidence. He studied her briefly, then nodded. "What do you suggest?" Thalric asked, his tone direct and firm. Seralith glanced toward the swirling sands around them before continuing. "There's an abandoned base to the south of here. If we reach it, we can send out a signal for help. But the journey will be perilous." A thoughtful expression crossed Thalric's face. Calling for help was a good plan, but he knew how difficult it would be to get there. However, given their current situation, it seemed to be their only option. Turning to his team, he gave a stern order. "We're moving. Everyone, get ready for a long march." The group began moving through the sandstorm. The wind wore them down, making it difficult to breathe. Sand found its way into their clothes as they struggled to keep their footing. As they moved forward, the weight of the battle and the loss they'd endured hung heavily on their shoulders. Seralith led the way, moving as if she knew the planet's terrain well. Thalric watched her, sensing something wasn't right. There was much he didn't know about Seralith. But for now, they had no choice but to trust her. After a while, the group took a brief rest. The sandstorm had subsided, but the dangers around them still loomed. Dorian, catching his breath, approached Thalric again, this time speaking in a quieter tone. "Captain, we can't keep carrying this much weight. If we don't leave the aliens behind, we're all going to die out here." Thalric looked into Dorian's eyes. He saw fear and desperation. But Thalric had faced tough decisions before, and he wasn't about to back down now. "Leaving them behind would mean losing everything that makes us human, Dorian," he said. "We're fighting this war not just to survive, but to remember who we are." Dorian let out a deep sigh in response. Thalric's resolve left him with no choice but to relent. But not everyone shared this view. Tension was growing within the group. Still, under Thalric's leadership, they had no choice but to press on. As they moved again, the silence around them became even more unsettling. None of them knew it yet, but this journey was about to thrust them not only into a struggle for survival but into a destiny that stretched across galaxies. As the sun set, the barren surface of the planet began to cool. The sandstorm had given way to a heavy silence. As Thalric and his team moved toward the abandoned base, they could feel dangers quietly closing in around them. Serelith, walking ahead of the group, carefully scanned their surroundings, searching for threats hidden in the shadows. Yet no one truly knew what they would face. Suddenly, a faint tremor was felt coming from beneath the ground. Thalric halted, raising his hand in a silent warning to his team. Everyone gripped their weapons. For a brief moment, everything was still. Then, without warning, a massive creature burst from the ground. It resembled a giant, dark gray, armored worm. As it shot out from the sand, a huge cloud of dust enveloped them, stinging their eyes as the beast launched its attack. The creature charged into the middle of the group, hurling 2 soldiers into the air. Thalric immediately drew his sword, rushing toward the creature in a flash. Serelith, right beside him, swiftly moved as well, brandishing her energy spear and charging at the beast. Thalric struck at its tough hide with powerful blows, while Serelith targeted its weak points. But the creature's armor was so strong that each strike seemed to bounce off, as if their attacks were futile. A moment of distraction caused Thalric to lose his footing. The creature lashed its tail, sending Thalric sprawling to the ground. His shield slipped from his grasp, and he found himself helpless as the creature's enormous jaws moved closer. In that desperate moment, Serelith darted toward him, pushing him out of the way just in time to save him from the beast's deadly bite. Both of them tumbled to the ground, Serelith's body falling on top of Thalric's. Gasping for breath, they knew the creature's next attack could come at any moment. Yet, as their eyes met, for a fleeting second, it felt as though the chaos of war around them vanished. Serelith's deep, dark eyes locked onto Thalric's, and time seemed to stand still.
But the moment didn't last.
The creature struck again, forcing Thalric to quickly get to his feet and help Serelith up. Together, they resumed their battle against the beast. With Thalric's powerful sword strikes and Serelith's agile attacks, they managed to drive the creature back. Finally, after a series of blows, the beast retreated, burrowing back into the ground and disappearing. As the group let out a collective sigh of relief, Thalric and Serelith slowly stepped away from each other. Thalric gave her a look full of gratitude, nodding slightly. "Thank you," he said, his voice trembling slightly. Serelith, her eyes fixed on him, responded with a soft smile. "We owe this to each other, Captain," she said, her voice calm but warm. The group pressed on after the attack, but something had shifted between Serelith and Thalric. Both of them felt it, though they couldn't quite name it. In the midst of war, a deeper trust between them had begun to grow. With every step, they became more aware of each other's presence. Thalric, in particular, sensed that Serelith was hiding something beneath her mysterious exterior. But he knew the time to ask would come later. When the group decided to rest for the night, they set up a small camp. Guards were posted around the perimeter, but the looming threat of danger hung heavily over them all. In a dark corner of the camp, as Thalric cleaned his armor by the fire, Serelith approached him. "Captain," she began, her voice carrying a hint of hesitation. "I know there's unrest among your team because of us. If we weren't here, you might be able to move faster." Thalric turned to look at her. The worry and doubt were clear in her eyes. "We're protecting each other on this journey, Serelith," Thalric said simply. A faint look of relief crossed Serelith's face. As night fell, the temperature dropped, and the stars, visible through the gaps in the sky, seemed to reflect the eerie stillness below. "What are we going to do?" a soldier asked, breaking the silence. His voice carried a note of anxiety. "If we wait any longer, we'll be trapped here." Thalric paused, pressing his lips into a thin line for a moment. "We're all sharing the same fate here." Serelith could feel Thalric's resolve, and instinctively, her trust in him grew. Just then, a soldier came running toward them. "Captain, we've found something important," he said, breathless. Thalric and Serelith quickly followed the soldier to where a small group had gathered just outside the camp. In the center, covered in dust, lay an object. It bore the symbol of an alien princess. Serelith's face paled for a moment, but she quickly composed herself, remaining silent. Thalric glanced at her. "What is this?" Thalric asked. Serelith took a deep breath and lowered her head. "There's something I need to tell you, Thalric." Serelith's words hung in the air as if suspended, while Thalric's eyes remained fixed on her. The brief silence between them felt like a precursor to the larger events soon to unfold. Suddenly, a loud hum echoed around them, cutting off her speech. The hum rose from deep within the ground, followed by a tremor that shook the entire camp. Soldiers scattered, grabbing their weapons and quickly moving into defensive positions. Serelith and Thalric exchanged a quick glance. They both knew danger was approaching. Just a few meters away, dust clouds began to rise, and the sky darkened. "We're under attack," shouted a soldier, his face filled with fear. Thalric immediately took command. "Everyone, defensive positions. Stop whatever's coming at us." Serelith ran toward the rocky cliffs surrounding the camp and began climbing. Once at the top, she looked down at the plain below and saw an army rapidly advancing toward them. The enemies moved with precision, clad in dark armor that gleamed in the fading light. This was a much more organized and dangerous force. When Thalric joined her, they both stood in stunned silence for a moment, staring at the sight before them. Thalric gripped his sword tightly and took a deep breath. "Who are they?" he asked Serelith. Serelith narrowed her eyes, studying the approaching army. "This is the force that's been hunting us." Thalric shot her a surprised look, but there was no time for questions. This battle was now a fight for survival for both of them. "Then they won't let us leave alive," Thalric whispered. "Get ready." The first wave of enemies quickly neared the camp. Their black armor glistened, and laser blasts lit up the sky. Thalric shouted commands down to the soldiers below. "Take cover. Open fire." Humans and aliens alike used the cliffs and natural barriers for protection, firing relentlessly at the advancing enemy. Energy weapons blazed through the night, cutting through the darkness and striking the enemies. But the attackers were vast in number and fearless, charging forward without hesitation. Serelith fought fiercely, using everything at her disposal to stop the enemy. The battlefield was chaos, explosions, gunfire, and the cries of fallen soldiers echoed all around. A nearby blast knocked Serelith off her feet, but she quickly scrambled back up, glancing at Thalric, who was cutting down enemies one after another without missing a beat, all while shouting orders to his troops. Suddenly, a massive enemy warrior appeared right in front of Serelith. His armor was thick, and the energy sword in his hand glowed menacingly. Serelith hesitated for a brief second before drawing her blade and charging at him. They clashed, their swords ringing out as metal met metal, the sound reverberating across the battlefield. Serelith made a move, but the enemy's soldier flung her into the air. She hit the ground hard, struggling to catch her breath. Just as the enemy warrior was about to deliver a final blow, Thalric rushed in, plunging his sword into the enemy's chest. The massive soldier collapsed, his metallic armor cracking with a resounding blast. Serelith took a deep breath and looked at Thalric. In their eyes, there was gratitude and something more. "Be careful," Thalric said, smiling. Serelith returned the smile faintly. "I won't leave you behind." Even in the heat of battle, this brief moment strengthened the bond between them, a bond that grew deeper with each passing moment of danger, though words were never spoken. The enemy assault intensified. Explosions rocked the battlefield, and soldiers on both sides fought to the death. The enemy troops had grown more vicious in the dark, climbing the cliffs and pushing toward the final defense line in the camp. Humans and aliens stood side by side, giving everything they had. Thalric and Serelith moved swiftly through the enemy ranks, doing everything they could to protect their allies. As the ground shook from the blasts, Thalric glanced at Serelith and shouted, "We need to fall back." Serelith nodded. "But where?" At that moment, the enemy army suddenly halted. An eerie silence fell over the battlefield. Thalric raised his hand, signaling his soldiers to hold their fire. Wait, something's wrong. As Serelith cautiously moved forward, a figure appeared in the distance. No matter how strong and determined Thalric and Serelith were, they had begun to weaken. Days of relentless fighting, insufficient food, and water had left them utterly exhausted. They were moving purely on survival instinct. Thalric still gripped his sword tightly, but his every movement had slowed. Serelith, panting heavily, was drenched in sweat beneath her armor, struggling to keep up. The soldiers around them were in the same condition. The enemies were slowly advancing, each one preparing for a fatal blow. Thalric suddenly collapsed to the ground, barely able to hold onto his sword. His vision blurred, and his body was on the verge of collapse from hunger and thirst. Serelith turned toward him and quickly rushed to his side, helping him stay upright. Hold on, Thalric. It's almost over, she whispered. But neither of them could see a way out. They were surrounded by enemies, who were poised to break through their defenses with one final strike. Serelith closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. Her heart was pounding. Just then, the sky lit up. A powerful beam of light covered the battlefield, causing the enemies to retreat. The heavily armored soldiers of the Imperial Army descended from massive ships, arriving from the heavens. The soldiers lined up in a disciplined formation, their metal armor gleaming in the bright light. Each moved with the determination that came from generations of rigorous training. Short commands and loud orders echoed across the battlefield, every soldier moving in perfect harmony, ready to execute precise tactics. Every step they took crunched against the rocks and gravel, grabbing the attention of the enemy. As the soldiers advanced from their positions, the look of shock and fear on the alien faces was evident, a testament to the Imperial soldiers' unyielding resolve. Armed with spears and laser rifles, they formed a shield-like wall against the advancing enemies. A group of soldiers moved toward the enemy front as their commander barked orders. Identify the targets. The enemy appears weak on the right flank. In response, the soldiers regrouped and launched a tactical assault. Moving together in sync, they breached the enemy lines and infiltrated deeper. As the sound of gunfire tore through the air, laser blasts threatened the enemy positions. Some soldiers moved with agility, slipping past the enemy's defenses, while others wielded their spears to form an impenetrable barrier. Spears thrown with lightning speed tore through the enemy ranks, creating gaps in their formation, as the soldiers' rallying cries echoed with courage and strength. The enemy hadn't anticipated such a powerful resistance. In chaos, they began to lose their formation and retreat. The disciplined advance of the Imperial forces, fueled by bravery and selflessness, was turning the tide of battle. The enemy's morale crumbled entirely. Thalric and Serelith watched in awe as their salvation arrived so suddenly. As the Imperial soldiers advanced toward them, one of the leaders approached Serelith and knelt before her, saluting with respect. "Your Majesty," the soldier said, "we're relieved to have found you safely. Please, come aboard our ship immediately." Thalric stared in shock at the soldier's behavior. Serelith, realizing there was no longer any reason to hide the truth, turned to Thalric with a weary voice. "Thalric," she whispered, "I am a princess." Thalric froze for a few seconds. "A princess," he repeated, still in shock. As he processed the revelation, many of the unanswered questions in his mind suddenly made sense. Why she was so protected, why she was constantly being hunted. Yet Serelith had helped him time and time again, even saving his life. As the Imperial soldiers prepared to escort Serelith to their ship, Thalric and the other human soldiers were left behind. The commander turned to Serelith and, in a respectful tone, said, "Your Majesty, we must ensure your safety. It would be best if we left the humans here." Serelith shot the soldiers a cold look and shook her head resolutely. "No," she said, her voice firm. "These people risk their lives for us. I'm not leaving them behind. We all go together." The soldiers hesitated, but could not defy their princess's decision. Thalric felt a deep sense of gratitude for Serelith's resolve. He approached her, exhausted but with a slight smile. Have you been protecting me this whole time? He asked. Sarilith looked him in the eyes and gave a faint, playful smile. Maybe, she said in a teasing tone. With the Imperial ships, humans and aliens alike were finally transported to safety. As Thaurik glanced at Sarilith, he couldn't help but think. The bond between them had been forged in battle, built on mutual trust and sacrifice. And now, no matter who they were or where they came from, he knew that this bond was stronger than anything. The war was finally over, the dangers left behind. But for Thaurik and Sarilith, this journey was perhaps just the beginning. I hope you had a good time. If you like my story, do not forget to comment and subscribe to my channel. Goodbye, see you in the next story.